On this episode of Just Informed Talk, the latest new Q post tell us to look at the last Q post we got, which was quite a while ago, and look at what is happening today in the news. Plus, we get pictures of F-15s, and is there more of a message than we might see? And President Trump sits down with Maggie Haberman. I have the story plus much more. Hi, I'm Craig, and welcome to Just Informed Talk. I'd like to always start by saying thank you if you've hit that subscribe button. If you haven't, please come here to the landing page, click the big red subscribe button, make sure you hit the bell for notifications to be notified when these videos get posted. So, here's where we're going to start, guys. Today is February 1st, 2019. Where we left off last, of course, with the Q post was January 13th, 2019 at Q post 2673. Of course, we're starting today at Q post 2674. And also, that is where we're going to kind of pick up is where we left off, interestingly enough. But before we get into that, I want to take a moment and tell you guys to come here and check out this page. If you don't know what QAnon is and you're trying to figure out what is this, what's this guy talking about, come here, watch this video, What is QAnon, The Great Awakening. We'll give you all the info you need to know about how to find the information, how to do the research and all that. And if you want to get caught up on all the work that's been going on, you can come here and check out my last few videos and share those on your social media, get the word out there. I really appreciate that. Now, okay, so today, we're going to get into some pretty crazy stories, so you guys are going to want to stick around. First, we have this post from Q. Now, this is, of course, today, February 1st, 2019, and this was around 1:22 Eastern Time, Eastern Standard Time. And it gives us this post. Now, what is this? Of course, this is the last post we got from Q right here, which basically says, it talks about the Democrat Party con as a whole, right? And it talks about how they raise money through funneling tax dollars into organizations like Planned Parenthood, who in turn spend millions and millions of dollars on political donations and other sort of political quid pro quo type setups. That is just one example of many of how the reason that the bureaucracy tends to generate itself and fund and to be like a self-powering engine is because once you put a politician in office, right, and then they say, oh, we're going to give $1.5 billion to Planned Parenthood over the next 3 years, and then you look at Planned Parenthood spending between $30 and $60 million a year in influence the outcome of the 2018 midterm elections, or that much money to influence outcome of elections. I wonder where that money is funneling back to. I think that's what Q want us to look at. And it told us to look back at like Soros and taxpayer funding. And it was basically giving us this example of an organization like Planned Parenthood, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, if this is actually what's going on, which, I mean, according to the paperwork and the numbers, I've looked at their filings in Planned Parenthood, and they actually account for this money. So, and that's part of their game. So that's what I think Q wants us to look back at. Of course, Q says here, last post before going dark regarding Planned Parenthood. What events followed that post? Coincidence? Anons understand Q. Now, what could he be talking about? Well, I don't know. If you guys haven't seen this clip yet, it's a very disturbing clip. Now, this is a tweet from Charlie Kirk, and he says it mildly. He says, nothing to see here, just a sitting Democrat governor, governor of Virginia, talking about how babies should be comforted out of the womb and then killed. See it for yourself. The Democrats are the party of infanticide. Where is the media on this? And then it says RT. So, look, let me explain what this guy says. I'm going to spare you the clip because you guys have probably already seen it by now. But this guy basically says, he's the governor of Virginia. He's on this radio show, and he says, look, when you take the baby out of the womb and there's this late term abortion, and he makes a direct reference to late term abortion, and then he talks about how they would actually remove the baby from the womb and then make it comfortable and then consult the parents, and the doctors would consult with the parents as to what they should do next. And it's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? That is, to me, first of all, that is literally murder, right? I mean, you can't kill another living human being. There's no laws on the books that say this is legal, except these crazy state laws that are coming out, like out of New York, where they're saying that third-term abortions are legal. Now, you can think or whatever you want about abortions, right? My personal opinion is I'm pro-life. I think all life is valuable, and I would always argue that whatever we can do to help save lives is what we should do. But wherever you fall on this issue, you need to remember that these people now are just openly talking about committing, as Charlie Kirk puts it, infanticide. It would seem if they're actually proponents of the policies that they're describing, it's insanity. It's crazy, right? And then of course, along with that came this. We have this incredible slew of stories, and the news cycle has just completely been taken by storm with this, because these people like Andrew Cuomo out in New York are literally signing laws that say you can do late term abortion, meaning if there's a baby in your womb. Now, I don't know how many of you have had a baby. I personally, I'm not a woman, so I can't tell you, but I can say I think it's worth to just think about, whether you're a man or a woman. If you have a baby inside of you and it's 9 months old and it could be taken out and it could live, right? Then there is I don't see the logic behind people saying, oh yeah, well that's the woman's right. Well, no, it's a living, breathing being. But I don't know. I'm not going to get too wrapped up in my own opinions, because those are my opinions, and that's what Q's telling us to understand, that this is not a coincidence, that this issue has come up for a reason. He was giving us a forewarning to tell us this was coming, and of course that's another subtle future proofs past type deal. All right, so the next one here that I'll get into is actually this picture. Now, this picture is pretty simple. It's of these two, I presume, are F-15 fighter jets. Now, with that being said, few places you can kind of find this. The picture, a lot of the Anons were really quick to point out that this picture was part of a Wikipedia posting that showed a pair of U.S. Air Force F-15E Strike Eagles fly over northern Iraq early in the morning of September 23, 2014, after conducting airstrikes in Syria. These aircrafts were part of a large coalition strike package that was the first to strike ISIL targets in Syria. U.S. Air Force photo by Senior Airman Matthew Bruch. All right, so this was what we were pointed to, right, by Q. Q gave us this picture. Well, it's two F-15s. Well, an Anon over on the boards had a really great theory about this, right? It talks about how it's two F-15E Strike Eagles, and it says they have the long-range weapons packages with precision capabilities, and it gives kind of this breakdown of what the picture name is, the file name, the .jpeg. It's sys_conf_spec_y. So what the Anon over here said, which I thought was very interesting, says System Confirmation Special Weaponry. And then it talks about how, if you guys will remember, February 15th is the deadline that was set by President Trump. That's when the government will shut down again if the Congress hasn't come together and created a legislation that will provide funding for the southern border wall. So if they don't get this done by February 15th, I think this was a little wink and a nod from Q saying, look, this is what the deadline is. It's February 15th, and I think it's kind of pointing to the fact that there will be an emergency declared and that he's just going to build the wall, because obviously President Trump has said, here, there was a recent, this is another thing that Anon points out, which I was going to point out in a video upcoming, but I'll just point out here real quick, is that it says, I think that by having the shutdown, we have set the table. Now, President Trump said set the table. You know, he does these little tongue-in-cheek things with us, I think, because, and the world, I guess, everyone's watching, because it's part of the plan, right? The table was being set, and the very next day we have, of course, them come out, but they say the stage was set for February 15th. It says, without a wall, it just doesn't work. So Trump made those remarks during the White House with American manufacturers, and it says also Nancy Pelosi said she would bring a funding bill to the floor with bipartisan support, but noted there's not going to be any wall money in that legislation. So what the Anon says here, which I thought was interesting, F-15s, it's February 15th, and it says we have the stage set for what's going to happen, and without a wall, it just doesn't work. So confirmation that the emergency is going to be declared. unless Congress actually takes action and effectively does something to change what is happening, and to fund the wall that needs to be created. That we'll have to wait and see. Now, a few other interesting notes about this picture is, if you guys remember this post from Q, now this was back from January 5th, 2019. It gave us a picture of a watch, a picture of a president. I think these are one of those executive order leather bound binders that President Trump uses when he signs executive orders, or things in the law. And this is a pen. It's a very fancy pen. Excuse me. And the watch actually was an IWC something or other. It was like a $12,000 watch or something like that. And the pen's obviously really expensive. And Q said down here, it says, will POTUS be at Camp David tomorrow? 1 year Delta matters. National security clock is ticking. Follow the watch. Q. Okay. So this was a little note from Q about following the watch. Now, here's a few interesting things. NORAD and US Northcom, which are like basically the spatial air defense Air Force, overseeing our airspace here and most of operations around the world to one degree or another, in unison with other command outposts. But this is them tweeting today, of course, 6 this morning. We have the watch, right? And in response to the CBS News post, where they talk about how the Super Bowl 2019 will have F-16 fighter jets will patrol the sky as part of a massive security operation. Now, I know these aren't the F-15s, but I just thought it was an interesting thing to note that they actually said this statement here. It's kind of one of those that you can read into it whatever you may. I just thought I'd bring it to you for your own entertainment or logical thinking or whatever. So this is the next one here. Story just coming out today talking about this interview that was conducted between this guy A.G. Sulzberger and Baker and Maggie Haberman, right, where they had a sit-down interview in the White House with President Trump. Now, this was a quote from the actual the interview itself, where Maggie Haberman says, "But what do you see the role of the free press as? What do you think the free press does?" And President Trump says, "It describes and should describe accurately what's going on in anywhere it's covering, whether it's a nation or a state or a game or whatever." And I really appreciate that. Now, if you guys don't remember who Maggie Haberman is, she's been referenced many times by Q, and there's been some tweets where it's cryptic language about being on a train and conductors and, messages seemingly being sent, veiled messages. But it says, this was from Podesta's emails. This was Maggie Haberman when she was with Politico before she joined the New York Times, where this is actually, I think this is somebody I think it's Podesta or somebody near him, describing her, saying that we have a very good relationship with Maggie Haberman of Politico over the last year. And this is talking to Hillary about, how they want her to tee up a story. It says, we have had her tee up stories for us before and never been disappointed. We think we can achieve our objective and do the most shaping by going to Maggie. Oh, of course you can, because she's going to shape the story, and she'll just tee it up for you, whatever you need to get your talking points out there, right? So, interestingly enough, if you actually read this story, the excerpts from here, you guys got to read this. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's pretty crazy, but I wanted to read this to you because here is Maggie Haberman, where she's talking to President Trump, and one of the first things President Trump says to her is actually pretty funny, to be quite honest. He says, so basically the first question that Maggie Haberman asked President Trump is, are you gonna just hang up your coat and just kick it in and say I've given it all I can and not run for re-election? It was a pretty funny question because it's so ridiculous, but President Trump is kind of just playing her and saying, no, I don't see that. And she's like, are you sure you're not just going to say I've done what I can, right? And he's like, no, I'm going to keep going. But then what's so funny is here at the end, it says, he says, so Maggie, here's the bottom line. I love doing it. I don't know if I should love doing it, but I love doing it. And he says, we just had a deal. And I was looking so forward to introducing you to you because it was very impressive. This room was it was a sea of seats. We had the entire cabinet. They are very impressive people. And I had it all teed up. And I said, where are they, right? I said, where the heck are they? And Maggie says, oh, we're sorry. We were in the security tent, right? And I think this is just indicative of President Trump throwing it back in her face and saying, and you got to read this interview because there's so much in here. I read pretty much the whole thing, and President Trump, it's basically, you can tell that he's laying it down for Maggie and saying, look, this is what it is. And they're kind of asking him all these different questions, and there's some neat little exchanges in there that are definitely worth looking at. So I'm going to leave that for you guys to go check out. But of course, that's where we are right now as far as the Q posts and what's been coming up in the news and all of that stuff. So another thing I always like to do is look at President Trump's Twitter, where we have so much information that it's always coming out. I like to go back and read through these because I think there's a lot of wisdom inside of what he says. And the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that right here you can see they have basically come out with these stories in the news about how Don Jr. made telephone calls to private numbers or from private number, that may or may not have been his father, in regards to right after the Trump Tower meeting with this Veselnitskaya woman who was let into the country by the Obama administration on a special visa that had to be signed off on by Loretta Lynch. But not like it was a setup or anything, but they had a meeting. It was about adoption, and then something was said about Russian dressing on a salad, and next thing you know, the Democrats are accusing President Trump's son, Donald Jr., of helping to collude with the Russians with this Veselnitskaya woman. And but President Trump says here, and anyway, the phone calls came out, and it turns out that the phone calls were not to President Trump, they were to his private associates, right? But it says the big deal, very mysterious Don Jr. telephone calls after the innocent Trump Tower meeting that the media and Dems said were made to his father, me, were just conclusively found not to be made to me. They were made to friends and business associates of Don. Really sad. And I agree. I mean, it's a sad day where the media just goes with any story 100 miles an hour when they don't even take the time to actually talk through these issues, and there's no discussion. It is, you are immediately guilty in the court of public opinion, and then you have to work your way from there backwards. You can't, there's no presumption of innocence with the media, and we're lucky we still have it in our courts, I would say, at this point, but there doesn't seem to be much of a presumption of innocence with the media for the most part, especially when it comes to issues that just pop up, or stories that they want to be true, that you can tell that they want it to be the way they want it to be. And here's another great example. As we've talked about before, it's Nellie Ohr, the wife of the DOJ official Bruce Ohr, who was long ago, and I'm going to read this first, but we talked about Nellie Ohr and Bruce Ohr recently in the last, I think, 2 videos ago or something. And this is a very important point, right? It says, Nellie Ohr, the wife of DOJ official Bruce Ohr, was long ago investigated for pay GPS Fusion members of my family, feeding it to her husband, who was then giving it to the FBI, even though it was created by ousted and discredited Christopher Steele, illegal witch hunt. Now, how many ways does President Trump have to tell us that this happened in order for people to understand that this was a violation of the law at the highest degree? You have Nellie Ohr, right, who is the wife of a DOJ official, this guy Bruce Ohr, right? She's working with GPS Fusion, and Bruce Ohr's getting this information into the ears of people like Weissman and Mueller and others about how there is ample evidence in the Steele dossier, which we know has been fabricated and unverified, which made all these kind of crazy accusations and was released. It was politically motivated in its release, I believe, previous to the 2016 election, which was a weaponized piece of disinformation from Russia, presumably, according to many congressmen who have come out and said this, that this propaganda, this Steele dossier, was produced possibly by Russians, and then it was fed to the FBI and funneled through Fusion GPS, or GPS Fusion, which was, of course, working with the Hillary Clinton campaign. So, I mean, look, this is insanity, and people are just not aware. But that's why we're here. We're going to keep going, right? And there's a few more. I'm going to recommend everybody go check out President Trump's Twitter, because there's always so much good, incredible stuff here. So I really would like you guys to go check out President Trump's Twitter, and that will be a cool thing to do. Now, a few things you can do before we sign off here. First of all, stick around for a minute. We got a lot to talk about more. Otherwise, you guys can come here, click the big red subscribe button if you haven't already. That helps the channel. Share these videos on social media, and leave your thoughts, theories, and insights down in the comments. What do you think's going on? What are your theories? What, what's your take on everything? Is there something I missed? Throw it down in the comments. I'd love to hear. I want to hear what you guys have to say. And also, don't forget to come smash that like button. You guys got to do it. It helps me, get the video up and get our word out further. So all you gotta do is hit that like button. It's pretty easy. So you guys can go ahead and do that. It helps out the channel. A few other ways you can help out the channel. Come find me over on Twitter at Justin_formed. That's a cool way you can help out the channel. There's a lot of information and cool stuff that I tweet out and share. So I want you guys to go check that out. Another way you can help out the channel, a couple ways, both financially. You can come over here to Patreon. That's patreon.com. It's a crowdfunding website. It's patreon.com/JustinFormedTalk. There's a link down in the description. Click this button to become a patron, and everything you guys contribute helps. It's a monthly donation. It's how I continue creating in the face of YouTube demonetization, and I thank you guys truly for your support and your efforts here. And also, if you don't want to do the monthly thing, I have a GoFundMe page. Link will be in the description. You can make a one-time donation here too. So I thank you so much for coming and checking that out. Now, before we go, I want to talk about the most important thing, right? And that is God's grace and how it is truly greater. It's how we basically wrap up most of these episodes, where we take a second and we talk about God's grace and how it is truly greater. So for this episode, this segment, I want to talk about an important verse that I found in the book of James, and it's in chapter 5, and it's verses 7 and 8. And I think it's just talking about what patience means, and how being patient in the Lord is what we should be striving toward. So I'm going to read this to you real quick. It says, "Therefore, brothers, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, because the Lord's coming is near." And that's what I'll say. No matter what we deal with here on this channel, the reason I always end with a positive message is because that's what God calls us to do. God doesn't call us to work in these divisive ways and to push one another away. He works in us to bring each other together, to become stronger in God, stronger in our faith, stronger in our love of one another, in our love of our neighbors. And that's what I try my best to promote here on the channel. And through covering the dark, we actually can bring the light, and we can shine a light on things that are not necessarily the brightest and most pleasing topics to discuss, but having our faith and understanding that patience means following through and diligence and perseverance and all of those things, then we know that if we look to God, because we know He is coming, then we will be saved, and then we can have strength in our hearts. And that's what this is all about, is having strength in our hearts for the Lord in the face of adversity, and bringing one another up, pushing one another up, and really just putting a positive message out into the world, and doing it on a daily basis with God, through God, for God. So that's where I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I want to say thank you guys for coming and checking out Just Informed Talk. Remember, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please come here, click the big red subscribe button. Now's a great time to do it, but that's going to be it for me. My name is Craig. Godspeed, and God bless each and every one of you, Patriots.